Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hey, this is Catherine Tabor, Senator Padme Amidala from Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Stay on the light side.
Welcome back to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
We get to talk about some more High Republic this week with a look at Defy the Storm by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. Before we start that, Jay, remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
You got it, Dennis. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. This will be a full spoiler discussion of the High Republic, Defy the Storm. This came out about a month ago from the time this episode comes out, and it is the first young adult novel in this phase. And the main characters are Vernestra Rwoh, which we previously met as the youngest person ever to become a Jedi Knight. Avon Starros, the daughter of Gira Starros, Deva Lompop, who is a Shani female bounty hunter, Jordanna Sparkburn, and Xylan Graf, who we met in a previous young adult novel. Before we get too far into the details, what did you think about this one overall, Jay?
Well, my general review is that if of the young adult novels from the High Republic that we've gotten, it's probably my least favorite. There were some really great moments in this book, and there were some things that I think that the book and the storytelling did very well. And then there were some other things that just didn't hit on all cylinders for me. There were some really creative ways of storytelling in this. But overall, there's some things that just, like I said, just didn't work for me. So as we talk this out and we get into some of those details, we'll get into that a little bit further. But overall, I mean, if we're grading this, I'd give it probably maybe like a B minus C plus in my book. But what was your overall feeling?
Hard to say without doing the entire discussion here. I think your grade is about right. And it's an interesting book. It made me like all these characters more than I did before, with the exception of Vernestra. I've always liked her. But Avon Starros, I just found annoying prior to this. Jordanna Sparkburn, I'm not sure I ever got the point of that character. And the last time we saw her, I think she's only been in one prior book in the High Republic. It was a young adult novel. May have been the last one from Phase 1, now I'm thinking about it, which, frankly, I didn't think that book was particularly great either, as far as the young adult novels from Phase 1 went. And for me, the breakout character was Deva Lompop. And
Yes.
I thought she was fantastic. And I actually grew to like Xylan Graf quite a bit as well. I found him to be an interesting character. So, it follows all of these young adults. It is a young adult novel as they are dealing with the aftermath of the Fall Starlight Beacon. And again, we're a year out from that at this point. And they all end up with reasons to be in the occlusion zone, not the exclusion zone. And we'll get into those. But there are some structure issues with this book. There are some plot issues with this book. And I really feel like it didn't have a solid direction until you got to about somewhere between the last half and the last third of the novel. And then it really picked up and it was very coherent and it went full steam ahead. But for the longest time, I was kind of like, why are we doing all these things? So I don't know. It's kind of hard to give overall impressions without diving into some of the details, to say that, again, I think you put it right. And it sounds generic, but there were some things that I thought really fantastic in here, but there was other parts that I was just like, I'm not sure why I should go on to the next chapter, especially early going. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until we got to the second half where it really picked up steam. So there
Yes.
we go.
Yes, and I think, to your point, as far as the characters go, that was one of the things that I did really appreciate about this book was just getting to spend a little bit more time with some of these characters that we saw elsewhere. People like Jordanna Sparkburn and Avon Starros, and you mentioned Deva Lompop, which I absolutely love. But overall, like you said, the first part of the book was like, okay, where's this going? There was a lot of loose ends. There was a lot of explanation, but not a whole lot of exposition. You know what I mean? So it was a little hard to follow at first, but I did like the ending
Hmm.
and where it ended up setting some things up. And one thing I really loved about this book, I have to say, is the way that things were explained in terms of I could visually see every little thing going on. I mean, even from there was one scene where the two girls were talking to each other and you could envision them laying on their back on the bed with their legs kind of half off, but their feet resting on the floor. And so you could visualize those teeny tiny little things. And I also think that it did a good job of kind of telling what was going on in the story by having a conversation between characters too, because there were things that could have gone on for pages and pages and pages that could have been told third person, but because the authors put it as a conversation, it made it more interesting. So I did appreciate that as well, just generally speaking.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's get into it here. And the best way I can think of is we can start off by talking about some of the characters and then to get into some of the bigger things that
Yeah.
happen here. But
Yeah, I like that.
our returning Jedi for this one, the main Jedi in this character is Vernestra Rwoh. And the last time we saw her was in the Tales of Light and Life short story collection, and she had essentially walked away from the Jedi Order and decided that she was going to follow the path of the Wayseeker, even though she didn't get that title granted to her by the Jedi Order. And she helped with that pirate operation that was going on. She ended up on a planet named Ebe, and she's basically trying to heal in a way from the trauma that she's been through with the fall of Starlight Beacon. Stellan Gios, her former master, is dead. She believes her Padawan, Emery, to be dead. And she gets dragged back into anything because Avon shows up and basically tells her that Emery didn't die. He is in the occlusion zone and they got to go save him, which is a total lie when it comes
Right.
down to it, or mostly a lie when it comes down to it. And so this book, she has a character arc, and it really took some reflection for me to get this on, because it wasn't always obvious, of her having to kind of contemplate where she is, where the Jedi Order is, what her dissatisfaction is, and she ends up returning to the Order at the end of this. So what did you think about Vernestra here and her story?
Well, you put it very well with her arc in
Mhm.
general. And as you said, it wasn't until the very end when she's meeting with Yoda and the council that she explains why she needed to do this. And at first, it was kind of like, oh, well, a lot of people went through a lot of trauma with the fall of Starlight Beacon. So you weren't the only one. But the way that she explained it made it so much more understandable in terms of being able to empathize with her reasons for doing that. And I loved the entire idea of her, and I know I said this before when we started talking about this book and in our starting of it, that her lightsaber turning into the whip and then back into the lightsaber is probably one of the coolest things ever.
Mhm.
And I just want to say I would love to see that in the Acolyte. Just gonna put that out there. But as far as Vernestra herself is concerned, she was able to come back to the idea that she never lost for Light and Life, but because of her reuniting with Emery and knighting him and kind of seeing the whole idea of we are what they grow beyond was a big thing for her. And that's what I think ended up really hitting home for her in terms of coming back to the order. So all of the action with her was great, and I think that her philosophy on the reasons why she does the things that she does and how she kind of keeps things together for herself and for others is just really impressive.
Yeah, I keep having to remind myself that she is only like 17, 18 at the time
Right.
of this book.
Yeah.
And so while she does a lot of things that are mature beyond her years, there is a certain amount of teenage angst and
Mhm.
self-doubt that comes along with that.
Sure.
And so, she gets through that by the end of the book, and then, she has a very big, important confrontation with Elzar Mann, which we'll get into in a little bit,
Yeah.
as well. But, yeah, so I liked her in this book overall, even though at times I was I found her just to be like a bit impulsive. She walked away from the order, but she was all about that. If I see people suffering, I have to go do something about it. And she'd be a Deva, and Deva's like, we have to lie low. At one point, Deva gives up, like, since you're incapable of lying low, I'm telling you
Yes.
to stay here while I go ahead. So she just kind of lets the kind of the knight in shining armor aspect of being a Jedi get the best of her a few times here, when it may not necessarily be for the greater good, but that is kind of like that line that she's trying to walk here, which is the order the Jedi order is not being their best selves with everything that's been going on from the Nile. And Emery at one point says, I'm not going to fight anymore. That's not what the Jedi are about.
Mhm.
And which I think is a mixed message when it comes down to it. But yeah,
There
so
was a
anyway.
few mixed messages in here. I mean,
Mhm.
the whole idea of attachment versus love and compassion,
Mhm.
and the justification for, "Oh, we can do this because it's love, but it's not attachment," kind of a thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that was interesting as well. I liked it when I read it, but frankly, I didn't take that many notes about it. So, okay, let's talk about Avon. So again, this is Gira Starros' daughter. When we first find her in the book, she is in the occlusion zone. Deva, is it Deva or Deva?
They pronounce it diva in the book,
Okay, it's
or
just
in
the
the
D.
audiobook, sorry.
It's the DEVA spelling that kept throwing me
Right.
off.
Yeah.
Diva is normally DIVA,
Yeah,
but
potato, potato.
right. So Diva is kind of her bodyguard. And as the book goes on, we kind of find out Diva really has a soft spot for Avon, keeps
Mhm.
calling her pup. She doesn't want Avon to kind of fall into this Nile murderous way of life when it all comes down to it. But Avon is a bit of a genius. She is an expert when it comes to all this crystal theory, which is really important to the lightning crash station, which is really the heart of the storm seeds, which power the Stormwall that has segregated the galaxy. And Avon is like not getting anywhere with her mother, Jura, and does not want to be amongst the Nile. So she basically throws a head of a Nile that Deva ate the rest of the
Mhm.
character on the desk and says that she's going to Coruscant and she's going to attend the university, and she gets there, but then she decides that she's going to get back into the occlusion zone. She's going to need Vernestra's help to do it. And she's going to take down the storm wall, and she's going to kill Dr. Nkampa, who is the person who's like in charge of the storm wall while she's at it. And it's all for the best of the galaxy. By the end of the book, she's had that opportunity. She's not successful in bringing down the wall. She inadvertently killed a different scientist and finds that she really doesn't have a stomach for this. And so she doesn't go through with killing Dr. Mkapa when she had the chance. What'd you think about her and her journey in this book?
Well, Aeon's kind of all over the place for me because, at first I kind of got this impression of her that she was going to be this little rebel, baddie because she threw that head on the table and the whole 9 yards. But like you said, she's got this really soft spot for just humanity in general. And what I did like about her was just the fact that she was a, a real person, where we get so many different types of characters within Star Wars, which is part and parcel because that's what Star Wars is, as far as being a Jedi and having all these different types of abilities and special powers and that type of thing. Well, Avon's special power is the fact that she's a genius. And, she's gotten to this point where she just feels like she's being used for everything. and then she feels like she has this mission to basically, recamp her research to get back what is being done with it in regards to the fate of the galaxy. And so I did like her in that way, and I liked her, as you said, her relationship with Deva, and also just in general with the other characters that she interacted with.
Yeah, I've got very mixed feelings about Avon when it comes down to this. She does kind of fall into a bit of a trope where she is this genius of a character, and she decides that she knows what she has to do to save the galaxy, but she's not really good with understanding other people
Hmm.
when it comes down to it. There's a funny little interaction with her and Reese Silas where she just ends up developing a crush on him at the beginning of the book
Oh
when she
yeah.
gets to the Jedi Temple. But when she lies to Vernestra to get her help to get into the exclusion zone, and you know, she feels guilty about that, but like not really when it comes down. And it's not till the very end when she knows Vernestra knows that she lied to her that she starts to feel bad about it a bit. And it's not until like she's really killed someone that she actually feels bad about having killed someone. So I don't know. This character has got moments where I think that she's really fun and she's really cool, but uh, the there's some moral issues with her, and maybe she comes by that naturally, given who her mother is and
Hmm.
how Yura is all over the place, from basically having been a senator of the Republic and now being one of the ministers of the Nile trying to do things. She's got a very fluid morality as well. So, but I don't know. At times, Avon bothered me in that way.
Hmm. No, I can definitely see that, and I agree with you.
Yeah. But you can't talk about Avon without talking about Deva, which we've been doing. And as
Mhm.
we already said, very cool character in here. I didn't realize till the end of the book that we'd seen her before. She was in War of the Bounty Hunters as that green-skinned alien working for Jabba
Mhm.
that kind of teams up with Boba Fett. And I don't know why it took me so long to put that together, but only made me like her even more. It's weird because she's like the anti-conscience conscience
Right?
for Avon, if that makes any sense.
Uh-huh.
She's willing to do the killing and the things that need to be done so that Avon doesn't have to do it. And I'm not even sure that's the best description of that character. How would you put it?
Well, she's this contradiction of herself because she's
Mhm.
this really kind of punk rock, eats people for dinner kind of thing. And like you said, she kills because she has to. And she was a nihil beforehand, and now she's this bodyguard to Avon. And but she's so deep of character, which I dig that about her. And I have to admit, I was with you. I didn't realize that we'd seen her again until I looked at her Wikipedia page because I had to know more about her. And I was like, oh, that's where we've seen her before. But just the whole idea of this species, the Shawnee, and the fact that they are so also very long lived, that she goes on to do all kinds of things. But I love the fact that she is this protective, as you said, she called Avon her little pup, and she would be very tender, but yet she would also be very vindictive and very protective. And, just in the end, she was just a great character. And I think she's definitely one of the bright spots in this entire novel. And just a quick aside, when I was listening to this in the audiobook narration, Amber Lee Connors is the narrator for this. And when she does Diva's voice, she sounds almost identical to Vanessa Marshall as Hera.
Huh.
It's eerie. It's like, wait, this is a murderous Hera. Is it's
Okay,
what I
that's
got in my brain
interesting.
pan. Yeah.
That's not how I envisioned that voice at all. So now I'm gonna have to check
Right?
that out. I have the audiobook. I just ended up reading the whole thing.
Mhm, you'll have to tell me what you think.
Yeah. Well, and I just like the way that Diva explains to Avon, it's like, okay, yes, I'll give you some of my poison because she does have a toxic poison that she can secrete. But, make sure you're going to use this because once you take that life, there's no going back from that. And,
Yes.
it'll twist you. And as you pointed out, it's a way of life for her because she does eat people. There's a funny line where I can't remember. She's hanging somewhere, and then there in a celebration, she's like, "Oh, I got to find someone to eat."
Yeah, not
And I think it was,
something to eat, someone to eat.
yeah. And Jordan's like, "Wait, did she say someone?" And which was kind of a funny interaction there. But yeah, I mean, she is a brutal character. She's got a fun personality, and so I don't want to call her the comic relief because it's not comic relief, but she does offer a bit of relief from all the angst that so many other characters are routinely exhibiting over the course of
Yeah.
this book.
Well, she's witty and she's very well traveled. She's seen it all. You know what I mean? Like she's
Mhm.
been across the universe and she's seen all kinds of things. But yeah, the whole thing with the poison, I just kept thinking, with great power comes great responsibility, kind of thing.
Right. So then we have Jordanna Sparkburn, who we've seen before. She is a San Tekka cousin. She's kind of got the role of protector and bodyguard for the San Tekka clan. And when the Stormwall went up, a member of San Tekka's and Sparkburns, including her brother, got trapped on the other side. So she's interested in getting across so that she can try and rescue some of them. I got to tell you, I mean, I largely thought that her and Silvestri were forgettable characters. And the prior time I read about them and whatever novel they appeared, I grew to like her a lot more over the course of this book. She, I think of all the characters, her motives seem the clearest in this book to me.
Yeah, I could definitely see where you're going with that, and I'm with you, and that was why I was saying, as far as is the exposition of the characters in this book, I really appreciated getting to know a lot of them a lot
Mhm.
better, and just the fact that she's a San Tekka, because, of course, we have that whole lineage with the San Tekkas, and within the High Republic, it's all about the paths and the Nihil and that type of thing, but then eventually, of course, we get all the way into The Force Awakens, and that we know that the San Tekkas have a relationship with even, the Skywalkers. So,
Mhm.
just knowing that about her particular lineage is pretty darn cool as a cousin. But I'm with you, as far as she and Silvestri or she and Chansey go, um, they made a really good pair, and I really liked that, and I liked the way that Jordanna was in the story and the role that she played, and she was actually kind of like this really unsung hero in a lot of ways for some of the things that she did. And quick aside, I liked the little cameo, if you will, of uh the crew of Chansey's ship, but yeah.
You mean Silvestri
Or
ship?
Sylvester, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting her and her mom mixed up to
Right.
between each other, but it was in the way that they talked about Geode, but
Mhm.
I wanted a little bit more of that, but I know that's not what the story was about, so
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was nice to see.
The vessel,
Yes,
right.
the vessel, yes, I couldn't think of the name of the vessel.
Yeah, yeah, with Leox Gyasi and Geode, yeah,
Mhm.
all of them. Yeah, I forgot about them for a second there. They were early on in the book, and they start off like not getting named, and then all of a sudden they do. Yeah, and of course there is this underlying mystery there because Jordanna's girlfriend is Chancey Yarrow, as you're alluding to, who got killed by Elzar Mann, and that's something that kind of haunts the end of this book, and we'll get to
Yes.
that as well. Silvestri started off the book seeming like she was going to be a major character, but
Mhm.
after about a third of the way through, she did not go to the occlusion zone with Jordanna. She stayed behind with Jordanna's cat, Remy, and that
Yeah.
electric with the horns that are electrified. And then that becomes an issue as well. And then we got Xylan Graf, who he's a Graf. They are rivals to the San Tekkas. We really found out a lot about that during phase 2 of the High Republic, about how they were rival prospecting clans. And he ended up marrying a San Tekka, and it's kind of this big secret thing. And the way he ends up talking about it is that or Care San Tekka, his husband, talks about is that, he married a princess, a wealthy princess, for like tax evasion purposes or something like that. And
Mhm.
it's like the one thing that Care can't leave behind. Meanwhile, Xylan like covers for this relationship a lot by only speaking about his partner in like the vaguest of terms, completely defers to Plinka, his snow dog, which has got like, it's this like gigantic 6-leg dog.
I love that,
His
by the way.
yeah, by being like his, treasured thing, and the reason why they can't blow up Lightning Crash Base because he's not going to let them destroy his dog. And he was involved in the operations of Lightning Crash, so that's why he's important to Avon and Jordanna and stuff like that. He's supposed to be able to have codes that will get them around. He knows some things with the Nile. He's kind of been had his arm twisted in to working with the Nile some, but he doesn't like them.
Mhm.
He doesn't want to work with them. I don't remember him being a sympathetic character the first time we read about him. Again, that same book where Jordanna and Silvestri were in previously. But this time around, I kind of appreciated his predicament here. He's got this reputation that he's trying to protect. He's trying to protect the family reputation of the Grafs and do well by them. And at the same time, he's doing what's best for himself, saving his own skin by doing what's required of him by the Nile, but also kind of undermining them at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I felt the same way. I didn't even really remember him until this book. And it
Yeah.
did a good job of really giving him a good character arc.
Right. So those are our major players in this book. And, so they get across the occlusion zone. Some of the things that happens are that they do find Emery. As you pointed out, he's alive and well. He's been leading a resistance on the planet Siswana. But and he's not going back to the Republic. He's going to stay there and help the people that are there. And there is that great moment that Vernestra realizes that he went from being this shy, unsure kid that was her Padawan, and in that year he grew up, became self-confident, and was doing what a Jedi was supposed to do. So she knighted him. That was a cool moment. You had that. You had Avon get to Lightning Crash base. Turns out she's not capable of destroying the Stormwall from there, and she can't bring herself to kill Campa. We kind of covered that. And then ultimately there's escape that's got to be made from the occlusion zone. And this was a cool bit of teamwork because they've got this ship and they've got a path drive, they got some path codes, but they don't really have all the technology they need to make it work. So Avon's got to input the paths into the path drive while Jordanna is reciting the nav coordinates from memory to get back to
Mhm.
Takodana of all places. So they're going to
Right.
Maz's castle. And then Vernestra is using the force to make all these adjustments fast enough. And they just barely make it and practically
Yeah.
blow out the, the path drive in the process.
Yeah,
Um,
that was super cool. And
yeah.
didn't they kind of decide on that because Deva was friends with Maz, and that's why they were kind of going there in the first place?
And Jordanna and Silvestri had done work for Maz as well.
Okay, yep, yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was awesome in the way that particular part of the book really did keep my attention because you didn't know from one second to the next if Jordana was going to be able to get back on the ship and all the things that were going to happen. And
Yeah. That was like straight out of Ahsoka. She goes
yes, the
extravehicular in
grab
space to,
boots. Hmm.
yeah, to, she's using what she calls as Mirrormaker, which is basically a giant vibro sword to take on the scav droids that are attacking the ship while they're like trying to get the path drive all set and ready to go. That was a really cool scene. I really like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I gotta say, the Merrymaker was kind of a character unto itself in this book, and because what they weren't just talking about her weapon, the blade, da, da, da. It was always the Merrymaker did this, the Merrymaker did that, and the Merrymaker was also very responsible for catching the blight on San Tekka and
Yeah.
removing that. And I have to say, I really like San Tekka. He was a
Okay.
very minor character for a while, but we'll get back to that in just a second, but
Well, that was the next thing I want to talk about was,
okay.
this other storyline that we had is that Jordana finds her brother and his family on this moon or on this planet called Arlie. I'm not
Mhm,
sure if the moon was actually called that or was the planet. Does not matter. But this was their home. And Jordana had left a number of years ago. But she gets back here looking for her brother and other San Tekka clan members, large basically to find this moon largely abandoned and it is like decaying. Make a long story short, what they figure out is that there is something happening to this moon that is very similar to what happens to the Jedi when they've been attacked by the Nameless. They
mhm,
become these calcified husks and they just crumble. But the difference is it's the entire moon. It's not just people that have an affinity for the Force. It's organic and inorganic matter. It runs through a cave system and basically collapses a city underneath it. And it's very contagious when it's done. So, that's interesting development. And then there's Nile ships in orbit around this moon that are not letting anything leave the moon if they can help it.
right.
That was creepy.
Yeah. This is actually my favorite plot point of the entire book. And this was the part that really, really captivated my attention because, of course, as we know with the Nameless, they prey upon Jedi. They're force eaters and they prey upon the Jedi. I kind of figured out right away that there was some kind of connection between this blight and the Nameless, and I was just waiting for them to say it. You know what I mean? But, the way that I look at it is like my mind is going crazy because I'm thinking, okay, so these animals have been almost like possessed by this blight, and that particular kind of animal is able to sustain that type of power and then is being able to be weaponized. And so with that whole thing with the contagion and everything like that, it was kind of for me a cross between, something like The Last of Us, for example, with the mushrooms, and something, that's just kind of weaponized. I don't know. I just thought it was a really, really fun way to go off on a tangent with that, and I was captivated.
Yeah, confession, I haven't seen The Last of Us.
Okay.
So I know it's very well regarded, but I just have not
Just
had an
think
opportunity to watch
zombies,
it. Yeah, right. Yeah,
containing
I get that. I know
zombies
the
and
general
food.
story about that. Yeah. No, I thought this was intriguing, and it very much was so. And it was definitely one of the better parts of the book when they were all aboard the ship, and then all of a sudden, Peaches, the child, uh,
Yeah.
the friend of Hearth, Sparkburn's daughter, was like, what's that? And points that bit of blight that's on Kare's knuckle. And then there's like
Mhm.
this big, it's so reminding me like the early days of COVID when no one
Yes.
knew anything about
Thank
that
you.
virus.
Thank
And there
you.
was all this panic about what to do about it. And
Mhm.
no one knew. And then they're like, he was freaking out. I was like, he was trying to figure out what he'd touched on the ship. And he'd carried Peaches into the ship. So there was concern
Yes.
about whether or not she had got any on this. And so there was this general freak out for a while. And then Jordanna's like, we have to cut that off. And
Mhm.
so at
We got
first I
nothing to
thought they were
lose.
just going to
Let's just
cut
do
off a
it.
finger, but they cut off his entire hand
Yeah,
and had it in a little container that has like it was a
like a
containment fields.
stasis field. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so very gripping scene. I wish there was stuff more like that earlier in the book
Mhm.
when it came down to it, because that portion was just a page turner with trying to figure out what was going on. But so much of the early part of the book was just like, what are we doing? It's like I don't understand the motivations for anybody doing what they're
Yeah.
doing here. And
Yeah.
so, but there were consequences, and we were invested at this point here. And this hiked up the investment quotient for the book real fast
Oh,
on
yeah.
all that. And, fortunately, it all works. And then this hand ends up showing up later. We could talk about the prologue just a little bit, which was interesting because it didn't like feature any of the major characters that were in this novel, but instead it has Ray Silas, who's a Jedi Knight at this point, but he is
Mhm.
very much more into research and the like. And he's been working with Aslan Rell, who we got to know in the Edge of Balance Phase 2 book.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, this is the guy that fell the darkness. We got to see that in the Shadows of Starlight series that Charles Soule did. And he's justifying things by this is what will protect them from the Nile and stuff like that and keep people from finding the planet where the Nameless are so that there's no more of them. And Aslan or Reese shows to Aslan this desiccated hand of Cares in this containment field. And Aslan looks at it, and this is like the first time that he's kind of like caught off guard. And there's this really ambiguous thing that he says, that he says it's coming for them. But there's no explanation as to who the them are he's talking about and what that means.
Yeah, it's almost like a abbreviated version of the Ki Sara Sara, coming
Yeah,
for
but
you kinda thing. Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, is it coming for the Nile? What is coming, and for
Mm.
who? And so, anyways, it was a very perplexing way to end the book.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was just making the leap from these characters in this book and then maybe bridging us into, what's coming next.
Uh-huh, indeed. And then we get this confrontation between Vernestra and Elzar at the end of the book, because Xylan had reached out to Nan, who, wow, I couldn't believe like how this character has showed up here and there. She was
I
introduced
know.
in the second book of the High Republic, which was the first young adult novel that Claudia Gray wrote, like Into the Darkness, or I can't remember
Mhm,
exactly what that was called.
mhm.
And anyways, she Into the Dark, that's what it was. And she was posing as like a civilian while she was kind of a Nihil all along. And anyways, now she works very closely with Marchion Ro. She was there when Elzar killed Chauncey Yarrow, when Elzar was in a rage and didn't realize what Chancey was doing, that Chancey was trying to save Starlight Beacon. And so she very bluntly recites to Xylan what happened. And this was all recorded, and then it gets handed over from Xylan to Jordanna, and Jordanna shares it with Vernestra before finally telling Sylvester what happened to her mom. And so Vernestra confronts Elzar about this, that you did this, you committed this murder. She's not entirely judgmental about it, is not how I'd put it, but she won't let Elzar call her Vern. She basically says that's something that she's reserved. It's, internally she says something that she's reserved only for friends that have earned it.
I was like,
And
"Burn."
yeah, and she thinks that Elzar is selfish and the antithesis of Stellan Gios. So I just got
Mhm.
done saying like she isn't judgmental, and I guess what I meant is like she's not necessarily judgmental to his face, but she's very judgmental in her thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think this is where a little bit more of the teenager in her comes out,
Uh-huh.
but yet she's also very mature in the way that she handles all of this with Elzar, because he basically comes right out and asks her if she thinks he's as good or can be as good a Jedi as Stellan. And, she actually responds with a very diplomatic answer and basically just tells him that it only matters if he's done everything in his power to be the best that he can be.
Mhm.
And do you think that you've done that, Stellan? Like, she could have come right out and said, "No, you're scum." Like, which she wouldn't do, but you know
See,
what I
that
mean.
still came off as condescending to me,
Okay.
when she did that, and I don't know, it's the Elzar's got stuff to answer for. I will not deny that, but it maybe I felt like it seemed to me like she was like she thought she was as good as Stellan Gios, and he was not. And her master is dead, and how dare Elzar be living in his place, or
Ah,
Elzar be trying to fill those shoes? They
okay.
didn't explicitly say that,
Mhm.
but it seemed to me that she was almost mad that Elzar was alive when Stellan was dead. And I don't know. I don't believe Stellan would have handled it necessarily the way that she did. And I'm not saying that she necessarily went about it all wrong. She is right that, and I guess I didn't understand that this has not been addressed with the Jedi Council at this point, but apparently it had not. And so
Mhm.
Elzar is going to have to
Right.
come clean with the Jedi Council over it. And, it was pretty much this unspoken thing of like, either you tell them or I will,
Mhm.
type of a
Yeah.
situation. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's she's come back to the Jedi Order this part that I'm struggling when it comes down to it with that part of the book.
Yeah, and the thing with her, Vernestra and Elzar as well, is I think that it's kind of interesting that Elzar comes to Vernestra being so much younger. And I know that she is very wise beyond her years, but it's kind of an odd person to say, "Do you think that I'm as good as Stellan?" You know what I mean? But then again, I can see from the lineage that was her master, and so he would kind of want that justification, or that kind of opinion from her. But I don't know, there's just something about that whole encounter that just sort of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah. And you hit on something right there. This, you know, we've seen this since Stellan died, which, and it didn't even get to the end of Fall of Starlight. Uh, which was that, The Fallen Star, rather, was that book that Claudia Gray wrote to end phase one. Before that even ended, Elzar was talking to Avar, that Stellan's always going to be with us. He's our pole star. And he had vowed that he was going to try and fill that void,
Mhm.
which is in its own way kind of pompous and presumptuous of him, if we're being fair, because I'm criticizing Vernestra as well. And then we've seen over the first book that George Mann wrote and the comics and stuff like that, that this is one of the things that he's struggling with. He's always asking himself, what would Stellan do? What would Stellan do? He
Right.
craves to make up for that because his actions basically called for Stellan to make that sacrifice. And so he's trying to, and as far as he's concerned, Stellan light was taken from the galaxy and it was far too soon. And the galaxy's been robbed of that. So he's trying to make amends for that. And so I could see why he would ask that question. And I'm not saying that Vernestra had to be fake about it with him, but I don't know. It's just it's kind of a, it's like, is she really in a position to tell him one way or the other, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
No,
guess
I
the way she
agree.
said it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe maybe it's just the way that this chapter was written, and they were doing what I'm trying to say in what you're suggesting, which is, Vernestra's like trying not to be judgmental, and so she said it this way, which is that I don't know if you can. You don't have to be Stellan. You only have to be the best you, and as long as you're trying to do that, then you're fine. But there's only one Stellan, and so. But I don't know. It's just on the heels of everything else that happened. I almost wish he hadn't asked for that. So
Yeah.
we could
But I
avoid
think
all
it
that.
also just shows that he's still struggling, like you said, and he's just looking for that reassurance and he's looking for that verification, from someone that knew Stellan very well and has that connection.
Uh-huh. There's so
Yeah.
much about this book we could talk about. We're just not going to have time to do. One of the
Mhm.
things that I want to talk about is this critique that I have for it. And this is not the first time this has happened in the High Republic. But who is the villain of this book? Beyond the Nile in general,
Mhm.
which character is the villain of this book?
If I had to pick one, I'd say Dr. Macampa is
Was Macampa
probably
in this enough though to be called the villain of this book?
no.
And that's what I'm getting at. Is
And
that
because I'm grasping here.
yeah, and I put you on the spot purposely, and I'm sorry for that.
No, you're
But
fine.
the point is that we have this great villain in Marchion Ro, but he frequently doesn't actually like appear in any of the books for more than a couple pages as in a very minor role
Mhm.
when it comes down to it. And we had books where Lorna D was the big villain, and now she's kind of in a gray area from what we've seen in the comics.
Right.
Or pick any one of the Tempest Runners or General Vice or somebody in there, but you had a villain that was consciously working against our heroes, and that was completely missing in this because Macampa is a villain for certain, but she's not the villain of this book. She's not out there plotting against our heroes. She's not out there hunting them down the way Vice was hunting down Port Ingle in Eye of the Storm,
Mhm.
and
True.
Avon Starros and the like. And in general, just this nebulous villain of the Nile, and we know who they are. But this really could have benefited if they were book. I think would have helped a whole lot of narrative and plot structure if there was a particular villain that was foiling them here, but there
Mhm.
really wasn't.
No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And I guess I can only reconcile that just by saying that as a young adult novel that maybe its place in all of this is just to be a bridge, between the other stories that are happening and to tie some threads together and just to shed some light on some of these characters, like Jordanna and like Xylan Graf and San Tekka, who, like I said, I just love. But yeah, I mean that's the only way I can maybe reconcile that.
But that gets me to my next point, which is what was the ultimate point of this book when it came down to it? It
Hmm.
introduced some things that undoubtedly will be important later, but those things could have been done in a couple short stories.
Hmm.
The this whatever offshoot disease of the nameless that desiccated Arlie. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's there. Some bit about the crystals and what's powering the Stormwall. I don't know that ultimately, I think back to Claudia Gray's first book, young adult book in the High Republic, Into the Dark. It set up the Dringer. It set up stuff with the Nile. It had a point. It gave us the Dringer and made them a threat in the galaxy and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And this one, they got away with the ship and it had a path drive, but the path drive was pretty much destroyed.
Right.
And it didn't, just like when Avar Kriska escaped from the occlusion zone, she did so using old press spectre technology, but it's useless. That tactic is useless because they now figured out and they just patched that problem. Was a Stormwall here. They didn't get a new way in, and we've been introduced to a couple things that might be plot points in other books, but I don't know that I can point to anything that said this book itself really moved the story forward.
Mhm. Yeah, and I wonder if that's the point, is that we're kind of playing 52 pickup with a bunch of different kinds of aspects of the story going
Mhm.
forward with where these things could end up in, other realms of the High Republic. Because you also have, which we didn't mention, J6 building droids for the Resistance.
Yeah.
So that's in there, and I do think that this whole research into what's going on with the Nameless and what's causing this blight is going to be a big part of that. And then, like you said, with these crystals and the path drives, because what did you think about the whole thing at the end with Vernestra trying to, like, basically she couldn't say the paths, she couldn't say the coordinates because there was a disconnect with what she could think of and then the words that were coming out, and then she was trying to scratch it into the dirt, and then as soon as she did, it would just blow away.
Mhm.
What was that all about?
Yeah, because Miri San Tekka, who's dead, kept appearing to her, and typically it would
Right.
occur when they were in hyperspace. She has that ability where she would
Yeah,
like,
the hyperspace dreams, yeah,
yeah, she'd
visions,
have these
yeah.
visions when she was in hyperspace, and we saw that from very early on with her and stuff like that. So there's definitely something to that, and there's these coordinates because she was showing them to Deva, and Deva's like, "Oh, that goes off to like beyond wild space and to a place
Mhm.
that like no one's ever come back from before." And so you probably don't want to know what that means, but I'm pretty sure it's Planet X, which came up in uh,
Oh, okay.
a middle grade novel
Mhm.
from Phase Two, and then it was also something Charles Soule wrote about when Marchand Rowe went to get more of the Nameless
Right,
and stuff
right.
like that. But so that's my guess on that. But again, the point of this is like that wasn't the plot of this book. The plot of this book is really kind of nebulous on this, which
Mhm.
was they had all these different motivations for going to the occlusion zone. They didn't really achieve any of it.
Right.
I mean, Jordanna did find her family, got them off that moon and stuff like that, but they didn't destroy the Stormwall. They didn't kill Kampa. What was going on with Emery was completely different. And at the end of this, there were some character arcs that happened, but I don't know if this book had like one coherent like plot. And books can have more than one plot, and there can be subplots and stuff like this. But if you were to tell the story of the fight against the Nile that happens with the High Republic, I'm beginning to wonder how much this book figures into your telling, how
Mhm.
necessary it's going to be for
Mhm.
you to know this one, to get it.
Mhm. No, I can definitely see that, and I do agree with that for sure.
So
Yeah.
anyway, okay, well, we've gone over what we usually do for these discussions. So you have any other final points you want to address? Again, there's plenty of things we haven't had an opportunity to discuss, but it
Right.
was a 369-page book, so we weren't going to hit everything. But like I said, anything else you want to make sure we touched on before we get out of here?
Yeah, just the fact that, like I said, San Tekka, I don't know what it is about him that just completely compels me, but I love the fact that he was a Zitherist because
Mhm.
we see the Zither, in I think we get really introduced to it in the game Jedi Survivor. And so just the fact that he lost his hand as a Zitherist is, very sad.
Mhm.
But so there's little things like that in there that I did like, but glad we did it. I mean, glad that we were able to review it, and
Mhm.
I will say that after talking through it, that there were definitely a lot of things that I understood a little bit more from the different plot points that were in there, and I'm so looking forward to seeing more of Deva Lompop. Just
Yeah.
want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. She's definitely a breakout star from this one. So I hope we get
Mhm.
more from her, whether it's with these characters or her own adventures, and put her more in the comics, wherever. She's
Yes,
definitely worth it and deserves it.
for sure.
Okay. Well, then that'll bring to an end our discussion of the High Republic Defy the Storm here on Podcast Stardust. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, then hey, consider hitting that subscribe button on your podcatcher choice if you haven't done so already. And you'll get our coverage of all the upcoming High Republic stuff. We're going to have a little bit of a break before they get into phase two, but there's some more comics and a few things to discuss before then. And once you've subscribed, you'll also get our news episodes, our other reviews. We've been talking a lot about the Bad Batch lately. and other discussion topics that we've got coming up. We can find the entire catalog of Podcast Stardust over on retrozap.com, which is home to the entire network of shows, which cover everything from the MCU, DC, retro culture, Dune, Star Trek, video games, and a whole lot more. And we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings and reviews on whatever podcatcher that you use that supports them, especially if that is Apple Podcasts or Spotify. YouTube music is great as well for comments. And we would appreciate it if you consider sharing the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. So, Jay, you want to remind everybody one more time what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found around the internet?
Absolutely. And we are literally found everywhere. I have people that say, "Hey, where can I find your podcast?" We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, X for our socials. So you can connect with us there at Podcast Stardust. As Dennis was mentioning, we have 2 different YouTube channels. So we have our regular YouTube and YouTube Music. We have Pinterest boards with lots of ideas over there. We're also on Discord. So if you're up for some real time chatter with either us in our Discord room or the many other rooms in the RetroZap castle, if you will, of Discord, there's all kinds of fun things to talk about. So hit up our show notes for that as well. And if you are in need of some new apparel or some home goods, you can go over to TeePublic. We have 7 different show logo designs available over there. And the link for that is also in our show notes. And we are also still partnering with Saber Masters, where you can get the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, which are amazing lightsabers. And you can get a 2-for-1 deal right now for $199 on the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0. And so if you head up our show notes one more time, or you can just go to www.sabermasters.com and do all of your little shopping. And once you're done adding to cart, make sure that you enter the code Stardust at checkout, and that will get you an extra $10 off. And if you do get one, make sure you hit up our Discord, let us know, and we can definitely clue you in on some really fun features. Or you can listen to our last World Between Worlds to get all the deets there. So with that, Dennis, let us know what's going on with Warp Trails.
Right. So Star Trek comes back tomorrow with debut of season 5 of Discovery. And once that happens, my wife and I will be talking about it on Warp Trails, which is our RetroZap podcast exclusive, our RetroZap podcast feed exclusive show devoted to Star Trek. We've been covering the shows on Paramount Plus, so that includes Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, and Strange New Worlds. We try to get the episodes out within a few days after each one of the corresponding episodes come out on Paramount Plus. And if you want to find the entire catalog of shows, just head over to retrozap.com, look for the Warp Trails page, and you can find all of our older discussions on those shows I was just talking about. Jay, fill us in on cosplay.
All right. Well, the cosplay train just keeps on rolling. So you can check everything out at my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. Got a lot going on right now in April. So if you check out my feed and my stories, you'll be able to see where I am, when that's going to be. And I'm working very diligently on my original concept Mandalorian right now. I'm so close to being done and putting the final touches on that. And so I've been putting a lot of work in progress kind of posts on my feed and story as well. And so you can always also catch me as Ahsoka, as Hera, the fourth sister. Got some fun new edits coming for fourth sister very soon too. So I'm excited to share those out. So again, check that out at j.snipscosplay.
Okay, so upcoming on the show this Friday, we'll be getting back into the Bad Batch with discussion of the most recent episodes. And then on Monday, it's time for another look at Star Wars news. So thanks for listening to episode 711 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. We are open 24/7. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.